Hey everybody, Jason Sherman here. In today's episode of Zero to CEO, I have with me CEO of Introhive, Lee Blakemore. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, hey Jason, thanks for having me.
No problem. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about the art of selling in the era of intelligence, which is a very timely topic considering artificial intelligence is like all over the news with ChatGPT, and not even just that, but there's like this AI war happening right now between Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and everybody's trying to get their gloves in the ring. What's your take on what's happening with that part of intelligence in today's market?
Yeah, it's certainly a very interesting time. And every time you log in and read your news from wherever news source you get it from, there's an interesting development every day. And for me, it's a good reminder and clarifying point about the difference between having contacts versus having relationships, because now we have access to a tremendous amount of information, whether it be LinkedIn or other sort of sources similar to that. And we're all sort of very connected, and I put that in air quotes if you could see me. But to be connected and to sort of have a connection is different than having a relationship. At the same time, from a business perspective, we all understand that if you have a relationship with someone or an organization, your ability to do business with that person or that organization improves greatly. So while we're awash in sort of information and connections, it doesn't change the fact that you really need relationships to do business.
Absolutely. And, there's the pandemic has kind of changed the way people make relationships. There used to be a lot of potentially in-person events and selling your product or your service in person at networking events or expos and things like that. And although it's starting to open back up a bit, I'm still seeing a lack of that, pre-pandemic sales kind of funnel that you might have had. So how do you now, not only sell your product in this new way things are being done, but how do you still use data to drive your decisions because of the fact that you're kind of limited as to where you can do it now?
Yeah, well, it's specific to our business where we focus on relationship intelligence and relationship data. You can actually gather and collect data and see the analysis to understand sort of relationship scores between yourself and an organization or your organization and another organization. So as far as trying to determine as a leader where you should focus your time and where you should go do further inspection and where you can try to identify where there may or may not be a problem in your business, understanding relationship trends, relationship trajectory is a great place to start, because otherwise it's sort of like, where do you begin? And sometimes in these discussions.
Right. Yeah, and that's the big problem that I see a lot of entrepreneurs have. Like, their challenge is knowing how to find those relationships in the first place. So while you might be a fashion brand and trying to connect with a manufacturer or something, I don't know, how do you identify the right person without spending weeks or months contacting a million places till you finally find that one? There's got to be a way to get through and navigate when there's not a lot of in-person interaction anymore.
Yeah, that's right. We've all been in that situation where you identify a target or an objective. I would like to go meet with this company or make a pitch to this company or have, whatever. And then you say, all right, well, first thing you figure out, who is the decision maker or the buyer that I'm trying to get to? And then you say, all right, how can I get there? What's my path? Who knows who knows that person? And the word knows is an interesting word in that description, because it's not who has a connection to via Twitter or LinkedIn or something like that, but actually who knows. And so there's a third dimension to that. And so understanding that really kind of comes the art and the challenge, because obviously good relationships are much different than happen to have a connection on LinkedIn.
And you mentioned there's a third dimension. Who who knows who? And connections are everything, right? I mean, it's how you network, and especially in how things have changed to a more hybrid environment now, right? So now companies have shifted to like work from home. So finding people might even be more difficult in an organization because some might be at this office, some might be at the satellite office, some might be in a different country, some might be in their living room. Who knows? They might be in the car. So how can we navigate that new kind of hybrid environment that we have? What are some of the top tips you have?
Well, first, I think you have to keep trying for the personal connection and engagement, the in-person aspect. I'm a bit old school. I've been doing this for a while. I have some gray hair, and so some of it
I
could be
think
just
we all
me
do
being,
after the
yeah,
pandemic.
yeah, for sure. Some of it could just be me, resisting change or nostalgic. But I do think, we also during COVID, if you had existing relationships or pre-existing relationships, you could switch to remote video, conferencing, et cetera, and not miss a beat with the people you already had
Right.
relationships with because you already had those relationships. That's much different than trying to establish a connection or establish a relationship via web conferencing. And so I think that's really the challenge today is if you don't have relationships with somebody, it's not impossible and certainly achievable, but it's a more difficult process to establish that connection, establish that relationship remotely. I think it's just part of human nature that that process accelerates when you get together in person. So first thing I would say is keep trying for the in-person meeting. And there's sort of in some age dynamics here. I think the people that are younger in the organizations are more inclined to do things remote. And I think, for me, I have to kind of keep reminding my teams to go out there and meet with people in person. And even if it's difficult, they work from home, so we got to go meet at a local coffee shop. I still think you want to give it a try. And then if you're not able to pull that off,
I mean, you could be in a different state or a different country. I mean, it might just
yeah,
be just
exactly.
too difficult to meet in person. So what do you do then?
Well, then you have to, do like we're doing here today, have a discussion with somebody. And I think you have to and deploy some of the same tactics or approaches you would deploy, which are sort of age old relationship building, conversational kind of discussions. Oftentimes, video conferencing, it feels very sterile. It feels very transactional. And so you can allow yourself to jump right into the nature of the call without doing sort of the breaking of bread and the discussion about who are you and what's going on in your world, what's going on with your family, how long, where do you live, where all those sort of icebreaker sort of relationship building tactics. I think you still have to deploy those even if it's on a video call.
Yeah, it makes sense. And, one thing I've always told people who've worked for any of my startups is when you, for example, reach out to a journalist to write a piece about your business, you don't want to ask them to write a piece about your business, right? You want to
Yeah.
form a relationship with them by asking them what they thought about this, or that you really enjoy their article that they wrote about this topic, and that you think that statistic was compelling. And you got to really kind of tug at their heartstrings. Oh, you like sailing? Well, I'm working on a boat in my garage. You got to really kind of put a story together, right? So tell me some of the stories that maybe you've helped your clients use to grab the customers they're looking for.
Yeah, well, for us, again, we spend a lot of time focusing on relationships, and there's a progression or sort of a maturity curve as it relates to contact data and relationship data. I mean, most of our clients and our client engagements sort of are in the CRM space because across most industries, CRM is where relationship data is typically stored. And the journey with your CRM goes through sort of multiple steps. The first step is how do I actually get data into my CRM? And if you go talk to anybody, any organization that's trying to deploy a CRM system, the first challenge, and oftentimes the challenge they can't get past is getting people to actually enter in data. And it's in this day and age, it's kind of hard to believe, but a CRM system is still fueled by data that is predominantly manual entered. But if you're able to get your organization to sort of put in data, whether you use a carrot or a stick, what you get is sort of the base level data. I'm just going to do enough to keep people off my back. And they're certainly not entering in a lot of sort of activity information. As you start to think about the progression of data, so you have contact data. If I want to move from contact data, then the next step is sort of, vetted contact data. Then the next step would be moving to relationship information. And what's the difference between contact data and relationship data? Well, a relationship would be how often am I interacting with you? So if you and I have a weekly standing call in our calendar, we email 15 times during the course of the week, I more likely have a pretty good relationship with you than the person who I may have had a contact with, but I haven't communicated with in years, right?
Right.
And so you sort of add that relationship data on top of that, which is a much more valuable data set. And then you take the next step is sort of the interconnectivity between relationship data and then opportunity data. Because really, from a business perspective, what you're trying to do is both manage risk and drive revenue. And so, really, if I am a CRO, a CMO, a CEO, those sort of roles, what I want to understand is for my forecasted business, where is my relationship scores decreasing, or where are they red, or where do I have a problem? Because that represents a risk to my forecast. And likewise, from a revenue generating perspective, you want to see where do we have great relationships, a lot of great relationship activity happening, but yet the revenue numbers aren't where they should be. That is an opportunity. And those two sort of scenarios of managing the risk and finding the opportunity, you can't get there by just looking at contact data. You really have to follow this progression of relationship as I talked about. And so that's
Makes
that's
a
the
lot of sense.
discussion and the journey we take our clients on, and it's been a pretty exciting, thankfully.
Sounds like it. And when I look at your accolades and the companies you've grown, and it's just I kind of couldn't. It's just, I was getting lost. I'm like, there's just so many things here that this guy's done. I'm like, wow. People tell me I've done a lot, and I'm like, no. Lee Blakemore has done way more than I have, which is why you probably have more gray hair. What are the tips you can give entrepreneurs starting out, business owners starting out, to not only start their business but then scale that business, because those are two different things. What are the biggest three things you would have them take home?
Yeah, it's a great question. And at first, I would say that businesses go through stages of growth, and I think an analogy. So it's not indifferent than us as individuals going from being a baby and an infant to toddler to working your way up. And companies go through those different sort of stages, and what's required from a leadership perspective at one stage is different than the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. And so when you look at companies that have scaled, they've either had leadership teams that they've sort of changed and addressed and adapted along the way that said, okay, this person may have been great in this role when we were sort of an infant or a baby or a toddler, but now we're a teenager going off to university and I need a different skill set, right? And so recognizing that you need to make those changes, it doesn't mean you need to change the people, but I do believe the leadership team needs to change their approach, change their skill set based on where you are in that journey. So I think recognizing where you are on that journey and being self-aware and then self-aware of the skills of your leadership team is super important. Uh, the second thing I would say is continue to follow your passion. Oftentimes you have a lot of passion around a concept and an approach, and then external parties get involved with the discussions as they need to. And next thing you know, you find yourself on a different approach that may make sense to certain people, but if it's
Mm,
not what your passion was, then that
wow.
that typically doesn't end well, right? And so
Been there and done that.
yeah, that's
It's not fun.
and and the third is don't lose sight of good business principles. I've now gone through a couple of sort of peaks and valleys in the market, going back to the dot-com days, and you watch these sort of when the market goes through a bit of a flurry and things get sort of heated, the dynamics change. They go from things like, well, how many clients do you have and what is your revenue and all, and
Yeah.
those sort of how many clicks do you have, or
Right.
but at some point in time people are going to ask you, are you profitable and what is your margin, and talk to me about how your profit's going to grow. And when the market gets to that phase, oftentimes leaderships are like, well, hey, wait a second, a year and a half ago you all weren't asking me any questions about margin and profit. All you guys wanted was revenue and clients. And and so if you find yourself in a market where people are only asking you about revenue and clicks or markets or clients, be prepared, because eventually the market will change, because that's what happens. And then someday people are going to ask you about profit and cash burn, and be prepared for that, and don't get caught off guard when it happens, because it will happen.
So right, yeah. Investors especially are always like, show me your data for the past 6 months. I want to see traction in revenue. But then you're right. Then it's about, well, how do I get my money back? Right. That's basically that's the question. How do I get my money back? Where's the profit?
The question.
So
that's exactly right.
Great. So where can people find out more about what you guys do in your service?
Well, Introhive is a company name, so Introhive, all one word, and you can go to our website. The nature of Introhive is, we believe that in an organization, all of the individuals that the members of your organization interact with is your hive, if you will. That's the beehive analogy. So, and understanding the relationships and the activity in your hive is really what we're all about. And so you can go to our website at introhive.com and learn all about it.
Perfect. Thanks, Lee. Hope you guys learned something important about relationship building and connections in your organization. Check out introhive.com, and we'll see you in the next episode.